The faint, almost inaudible hum vibrated through the deck plates of the Wanderlust, a familiar song to Preston Gauge, but tonight, another, stranger melody seemed to try and pierce it. He leaned closer to the main console, eyes scanning the swirling anomaly displayed on his primary view screen. Before him, a woman with eyes like distant nebulae and skin that shimmered with an inner light spoke, her voice a soft chime against the void. "The star song grows faint here, human," Aurelia Vesta murmured, a small, crystalline creature perched on her shoulder pulsing with a worried, azure light. "Can your charts even hear its silence?" Preston, a galactic cartographer whose life was usually spent in the lonely pursuit of mapping the forgotten edges of space, found himself a salvager by grim necessity. His ship, the Wanderlust, was old but reliable, equipped for the kind of deep space retrieval that paid the bills but chipped away at his soul. Today, that necessity had led him to this Kaluza-Klein Bottleneck, a naturally occurring tear in the fabric of space-time where extra dimensions blood through, making navigation a chaotic gamble, and escape a near impossibility for any unprepared vessel, and trapped within its incandescent, roiling energies, like a firefly in a storm, was a ship of unknown origin, sleek and dark against the violent cosmic light show. It was broadcasting a distress signal, faint and alien. Preston, burdened by a responsibility that seemed to follow him across the star lanes, felt the familiar tug. His intellectual curiosity warred with the instinct for self-preservation. Kaluza-Klein Bottlenecks were cosmic predators, spitting ships out into unknown regions, unknown times, or simply crushing them into oblivion. The alien ship, which Aurelia would later tell him was named the Stardust Drifter, was clearly not designed for such dimensional turbulence. Its silhouette was elegant, almost organic, but now it listed badly, flickering energy shields barely holding against the exotic particles bombarding it. Preston gnawed his lip. Standard procedure was to log it, warn others, and move on. But the signal, weak as it was, had a strange quality, a lament that resonated with some deep, unacknowledged part of him. He made his decision. "All right, old girl," he muttered to the Wanderlust. "Let's see if we can't pluck this one from the dimensional tide." The rescue was harrowing. The Wanderlust bucked and groaned as Preston maneuvered it through gravitational eddies and pockets of temporal distortion. Each lurch sent shivers down his spine. He was a cartographer, not a daredevil pilot, though his long years in the void had taught him a thing or two about handling his ship in tight spots. He extended the heavy salvage grapples, the magnetic locks struggling to find purchase on the alien hull amidst the chaotic energy fields. Finally, with a jarring clang that echoed through his ship, they connected. He began the delicate process of reeling it in, the bottleneck fighting him every inch of the way. Its dazzling, lethal beauty a constant threat on his screens. Boarding the Stardust Drifter was like stepping into another reality. The air was thin, smelling of ozone and something else, something like crushed flowers in starlight. Emergency lights pulsed weakly, casting long dancing shadows. The technology was unlike anything he'd encountered: smooth, flowing consoles that seemed to respond to proximity, intricate crystalline structures embedded in the walls that hummed with a faint internal energy. And then he saw her. Aurelia Vesta. She was slumped in a command chair that looked more like a throne carved from obsidian. The small creature, Pip, nestled against her neck, its light dim. Her attire was woven from fibers that shifted in color, and her features, though drawn with exhaustion, possessed an ethereal grace. When her eyes, the color of ancient galaxies, flickered open and focused on him, Preston felt an unexpected jolt, a sense of profound alienness mixed with a strange familiarity. She was weak, but her gaze was intense. He raised his hands slowly. "I'm Preston Gauge, of the Galactic Cartography Guild. Mostly, I'm here to help." His universal translator, a reliable if sometimes stilted piece of tech, hopefully conveyed his intent. Aurelia stared at him, her head tilting slightly. Pip, the symbiote on her shoulder, let out a soft chitter, and its light intensified for a moment, focusing on Preston like a tiny, curious searchlight. "Help," she repeated, her voice raspy, yet melodic. "The bottleneck, it does not easily release its prizes." Her English, filtered through the translator, was precise, almost formal. Preston nodded, his gaze sweeping over the damaged bridge. "Your ship sustained heavy damage. We need to get you out of here before this whole pocket collapses." He gestured vaguely at the chaos visible through her viewport. "I've managed to secure a tow line. If we're lucky, my ship can pull us both clear." Aurelia's eyes narrowed slightly. "You risk your vessel for an unknown. What is your claim for this assistance? Preston blinked. Claim. Well, standard salvage protocols dictate. He paused, seeing the utter lack of comprehension on her face. This was not the time for haggling. Look, let's just get to safety first. We can talk about compensation later. Aurelia slowly pushed herself up, swaying slightly. Pip chirped again, nuzzling her cheek. My people, she said, her voice gaining a little strength. Do not trade in currency, as you might understand it. We operate on a balance of obligation, of essence given and received. A life preserved, a path illuminated, these create debts of the soul, threads woven into the great tapestry of existence. Preston, a man of charts and figures, found himself at a loss. Debts of the soul. Look, lady, I just want to make sure you don't end up as dimensional dust. His intellectual curiosity, however, was piqued. This was far more interesting than hauling scrap. The Stardust Drifter gave a violent shudder, alarms blaring. We're out of time, Preston said urgently. Can you get to my ship? Or should I try to transfer you? Aurelia straightened, a flicker of resolve in her eyes. I will come, Pip and I. The Drifter, its song is nearly silent now. She touched a console, and a section of the wall seemed to dissolve, revealing a small, surprisingly well-stocked emergency kit. She slung it over her shoulder. The transfer was perilous. They had to use an emergency tether, crossing the void between the two ships as the bottleneck howled around them, like a living entity. Aurelia moved with an unnatural grace despite her weakness, Pip clinging tightly, its light pulsing rhythmically. Once aboard the Wanderlust, Preston strapped her into the co-pilot's seat. Hold on. He yelled over the roar of his engines fighting the dimensional currents. He poured every ounce of his skill and his ship's power into the escape. The viewscreen was a maelstrom of impossible colors and geometries. Metal shrieked, systems overloaded and reset, but slowly, agonizingly, the Wanderlust, dragging the crippled Stardust Drifter, began to pull free from the Kaluza-Klein Bottleneck's chaotic embrace. With a final, violent wrench, they burst back into relatively normal space. The stars outside no longer warped and screaming but steady, familiar pinpricks of light. Preston let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his hands trembling on the controls. One made it, he gasped. Aurelia was pale, her eyes closed, but she was breathing steadily. Pip emitted a soft, warm glow. Before Preston could even run a full diagnostic on his own strained systems, a new alert blared from his console. Proximity warning. A sleek, obsidian black ship shaped like a predatory insect decloaked a mere 1,000 kilometers off their port bow. It bore no markings Preston recognized, but its design radiated menace. What in the void is that? He muttered, his brief moment of relief evaporating. Aurelia's eyes snapped open. She leaned forward, her gaze fixed on the newcomer. A look of profound dread, almost primal fear, crossed her face. Pip's light flickered erratically, turning a sickly green. Harvesters, she whispered, her voice barely audible. They found us. The Harvester ship launched a volley of energy pulses, not weapons fire, Preston realized with a chill, but some kind of scanning beam, invasive and cold. They know I'm free of the bottleneck, Aurelia said, her hand instinctively going to Pip. They hunt those who carry the old songs. Preston didn't understand what she meant by old songs, but the immediate threat was undeniable. The Harvester ship was faster, more agile. A chase was inevitable, and in his current state, with a crippled alien vessel in tow, the Wanderlust was hopelessly outmatched. His responsibility, once just for himself and his mission, now extended to this strange, compelling woman and her silent, glowing companion. The universe, it seemed, had just gotten a lot more complicated, and a lot more dangerous. The Harvester vessel, a sliver of polished obsidian against the star-dusted canvas, closed the distance with unnerving speed. Preston pushed the Wanderlust's engines to their absolute limit, the old ship vibrating like a plucked string. The dead weight of the Stardust Drifter was a terrible drag. Can you detach your ship? He yelled over the engine scream. We might have a better chance if I'm not towing you. Aurelia shook her head, her eyes wide with a fear that seemed ancient. The Drifter contains fragments. Echoes. I cannot abandon it, not to them. Pip, on her shoulder, pulsed a rapid, distressed blue. Energy beams, not designed to destroy but to disable, lanced from the Harvester ship, striking dangerously close. One beam clipped the Wanderlust's port stabilizer, sending a violent shudder through the deck. Warning lights flashed across Preston's console like angry fireflies. Losing attitude control on port side, he gritted out, fighting the joystick. They're trying to cripple us, not kill us. What do they want? Aurelia gripped her seat, her knuckles white. They want the silence. They want all star songs to end. They want me. Another beam struck, this time hitting the primary engine housing of the Stardust Drifter. The alien ship, already battered, convulsed, and Preston saw fragments of its hull shear off into the void. "Her drive is gone! Completely!" he shouted. The drag increased, pulling them into a disastrous spin. "We're going down." Preston fought for control, his mind racing. The nearest gravity well was a barren, unremarkable moon orbiting a gas giant, noted on his charts as XM 734 uninhabited and interesting. Now, it was their only hope of survival. "I'm going to try and use its gravity to slingshot us, shake them, then make an emergency landing if we can. Brace yourself." He wrestled the Wanderlust into a desperate dive towards the dull, cratered sphere of XM 734. The Harvester ship, anticipating his move, adjusted its trajectory, cutting them off. It was clear they weren't going to escape the pursuit easily. The G-forces pressed them into their seats as Preston skimmed the upper atmosphere of the moon, using its wispy envelope for atmospheric braking. The friction heated the hull alarmingly. The Harvester ship followed, relentless. "They're not giving up," Aurelia cried out, watching the pursuing vessel on a secondary screen. Suddenly, a critical system on the Wanderlust let out a piercing shriek. The main navigation console went dark. "Nav computer offline," Preston exclaimed, his heart sinking. "Damn it. That last hit must have fried something vital. I can't plot a jump. Can't even get a stable course for landing." They were flying blind, at the mercy of failing systems and a determined enemy. Aurelia leaned forward, her eyes scanning the dead console. Pip, seemingly sensing the urgency, detached from her shoulder and floated towards the inert panel, its light focusing intently on the circuitry beneath. "Perhaps," Aurelia said softly, her voice surprisingly calm amidst the chaos. "The song of this machine is merely disrupted, not silenced." Preston stared at her. "What are you talking about? It's fried space dust." Aurelia placed her hands gently on the console, near where Pip hovered. She closed her eyes, her breathing deepening. A faint, almost imperceptible hum began to emanate from her, a sound that resonated in Preston's teeth. Pip's light pulsed in time with the hum, growing brighter, shifting through a spectrum of colors. "I am a Datascryer," she whispered, her voice seeming to come from a distance. "I listen to the echoes in the circuits, the memories in the metal. I can feel its pain." Preston watched dumbfounded. This was beyond any tech repair he'd ever witnessed. It was a ritual. Her fingers twitched, tracing unseen pathways on the console's surface. Sparks, not of damage but a strange, controlled energy, danced between her fingertips and Pip. The small creature seemed to be channeling something, focusing it. Slowly, miraculously, a flicker of light appeared on the dead navigation screen. Then another. Garbled data streams began to scroll, then stabilize, then resolve into coherent readouts. Incredible. Preston breathed. Aurelia swayed, a sheen of sweat on her brow, but the navigation system was coming back online, albeit erratically. "It holds," she said, her voice strained. "But it is fragile." The Harvester ship, momentarily surprised by their recovery, renewed its attack. A new volley of disabling shots bracketed them. "They're boxing us in," Preston said. "Even with Nav, we can't outrun them like this." He looked at the moon looming below, its cratered surface a tapestry of gray and black. "We have to land." Now, his own mind, usually reliant on precise data and calculations, felt a strange surge of intuition, a desperate gamble. The instruments were still jumpy, the path to a safe landing zone unclear, amidst the moon's rugged terrain and the Harvester's fire. But looking at the chaotic landscape, a specific jagged valley seemed to call to him, a path invisible to his damaged sensors, but clear in his mind's eye. "There," he pointed, a conviction in his voice that surprised even himself. "That Rift Valley. It's shielded by those messes. If I can just get us over that ridge." It was a wild chance, a pilot's hunch elevated to desperate strategy. He threw the Wanderlust into a gut-wrenching dive, Aurelia's newly repaired navigation system flickering but holding just enough to give him basic telemetry. He trusted his gut, this sudden, inexplicable certainty about the terrain. They skimmed terrifyingly close to jagged peaks, the Harvester ship struggling to match their reckless maneuvers in the tight canyons. With a final burst of thrust from the failing engines, the Wanderlust, still dragging the dead weight of the Stardust Drifter, scraped over the ridge and into the relative shelter of the deep valley. Preston executed a controlled crash, the landing gear collapsing as they skidded across the dusty, rock-strewn ground. throwing up a colossal plume of debris. The impact was brutal, throwing them against their restraints. Then, silence, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere from a minor hull breach. They were down stranded. But, for the moment, alive. The harvester ship, too large to navigate the narrow valley entrance at speed, circled above, temporarily thwarted. Their forced proximity had just become a fight for survival on a desolate, alien rock, with a relentless enemy waiting just beyond the canyon walls. The turning point had arrived not with a bang, but with a crash and the quiet hum of alien intuition, bridging the gap between man and machine. The silence in the cockpit of the Wanderlust was heavy, thick with the dust of XM-734 and the unspoken tension of their predicament. Preston unbuckled himself, his muscles aching from the crash. Status report, he muttered, mostly to himself, already knowing the answer would be grim. The main power was out, life support was on emergency reserves, and the hull integrity was compromised in several sectors. The Stardust drifter, still tethered, lay like a broken bird beside them, a monument to their narrow escape. Aurelia was checking herself, her movements slow. Pip, perched back on her shoulder, emitted a tired, dim glow. "The harvesters will not wait long," she said, her voice low. "They will find a way into this valley. Or they will wait for us to emerge." Preston nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "First things first, we need to assess the damage and see if we can get basic systems back online. Then, figure out how to hide ourselves better." He looked at Aurelia. "That thing you did with the nav computer. What was that exactly?" Aurelia met his gaze, her own reflecting a deep wariness. "I am a Datascryer, as I said. My people have a connection to the patterns of information, to the flow of energy and technology. Pip helps me focus this connection. We can often soothe, persuade, or awaken the dormant spirit within machines." Preston, a man of science and logic, struggled to reconcile this with his understanding of the universe. Spirit within machines. He echoed, a hint of skepticism in his tone, though he couldn't deny what he'd seen. "It is a different way of understanding, Preston Gauge," she replied softly. "Your science seeks to dissect and command. Mine seeks to listen and harmonize." Despite his ingrained skepticism, his intellectual curiosity was thoroughly engaged. This was a paradigm shift. "Can you harmonize our main power systems?" he asked, gesturing to the dead consoles. Aurelia surveyed the darkened bridge. "Perhaps. But it will take time and energy, and I will need components. Conduits that are not shattered." Thus began their uneasy alliance on the desolate moon. Preston, using his knowledge of starship engineering, identified the most critical systems and the nature of the damage. Aurelia, with Pip as her guide, would then attempt her harmonizing. It was a slow, painstaking process. For the main power coupling, which had been completely severed, Preston had to cannibalize parts from non-essential systems. He handed Aurelia a length of heavy-gauge conduit. "This is the best I can do. Think your listening can make this work." Aurelia took the conduit, her fingers tracing its metallic surface. Pip nuzzled against it, emitting a soft hum. "The song is faint, but not entirely broken," she murmured. She closed her eyes, and once again that strange, subtle resonance filled the air around her. Preston watched, fascinated and a little unnerved, as she worked. She didn't use tools in the conventional sense. Instead, she seemed to coax the damaged components, her hands glowing faintly as Pip pulsed with light. Tiny filaments of energy, like miniature lightning, arsed between her fingers and the broken circuits, mending them, rerouting them. It was like watching a surgeon and a sorceress rolled into one. After what felt like hours, a hesitant flicker of light appeared on a secondary console, then another. Main power wasn't fully restored, but essential systems like internal atmosphere and basic comms flickered back to life. "Remarkable," Preston admitted, genuinely impressed. "Absolutely remarkable." Aurelia sagged against the console, clearly drained. Pip's light was dimmer. "The balance requires effort," she whispered. Their immediate survival secured, the next challenge was resources. The Wanderlust's water recyclers were damaged, and their emergency supplies wouldn't last long. Scans of the valley, once basic power was restored, showed no surface water, but there were indications of subterranean ice deposits in a series of caves not far from their crash site. "We need water," Preston stated. "I'll go. You should rest. That repair took a lot out of you." Aurelia shook her head. "I will accompany you. This moon is unknown. 2 sets of eyes are better than one, and perhaps its stones also have a song." Preston hesitated. He was used to working alone, burdened by his own responsibilities. But he couldn't deny the logic in her words, nor the quiet strength she possessed. "All right," he conceded, "but stick close. We don't know what else is out here." They donned environment suits, the thin atmosphere of XM734 being unbreathable. The landscape outside was starkly beautiful in its desolation. Jagged, rust-colored mesas rose against a bruised purple sky. The twin suns of the system cast long, eerie shadows. As they walked, Preston found himself observing Aurelia. She moved with a quiet grace, her eyes constantly scanning, not just for threats, but with a kind of reverence for the alien environment. Pip, perched on her helmet now, seemed to be tasting the very air, its light shifting subtly. During their trek, they talked. Preston, driven by his insatiable curiosity, asked about her people, the Datascryers. Aurelia, initially reserved, began to open up. She spoke of her homeworld, a place she only knew through the star songs, a sort of ancestral, psionic map woven into her consciousness, passed down through generations of Datascryers. "It is not a physical map, like your charts, Preston Gauge," she explained, her voice slightly distorted by the suit's comms. "It is a resonance, a feeling, a certainty that guides us through the void to places of significance, places where the universe's own song is strongest." "Like Xylos?" Preston asked, remembering the name she'd mentioned. "Yes," Aurelia confirmed. "Xylos is a sanctuary, a place of ancient knowledge. The star song that leads there is very old, very powerful. It is why the harvesters hunt me. They seek to silence all such songs, to erase the old ways, the deep connections." "Why?" Preston pressed. "What do they gain by that?" Aurelia paused, looking out at the desolate landscape. The harvesters reshape worlds to their own design, without regard for what exists. They see the universe as raw material. The star songs, the ancient connections, they represent a different order, a harmony they cannot control, and so they seek to destroy it. They fear what they do not understand, what they cannot assimilate. Preston, in turn, found himself talking about his own life, the solitude of a cartographer, the endless star charts that were his only companions. He spoke of the allure of the unknown, but also the weight of always being an observer, rarely a participant. "This," he admitted, gesturing to their crashed ship and the alien moon, "is probably the most participation I've had in years." Aurelia listened intently, Pip occasionally chirping as if in agreement. "Your path was solitary," she said, "but perhaps it was preparing you. Your charts map the void, but now you navigate the currents of fate alongside another." Her words, though strange to his ears, held a certain truth. He did feel different, less adrift. They found the caves, and thankfully the ice deposits. As they were carefully chipping away samples, a tremor ran through the ground. A section of the cave roof groaned ominously. "Save in," Preston yelled, grabbing Aurelia's arm and pulling her back just as tons of rock cascaded down where they had been standing. Dust filled the air. They were shaken, but unharmed. In the dim light of their helmet lamps, their eyes met. A shared moment of fear, then relief. The physical closeness, the shared danger, was forging an unspoken bond. Back at the Wanderlust, as they worked to melt the ice, Aurelia seemed to weaken. Her skin, normally luminous, grew dull, and she shivered despite the ship's regulated temperature. Pip's light became faint and flickered like a dying candle. "Aurelia, what's wrong?" Preston asked, alarmed. She leaned heavily against a bulkhead. "I am disconnected," she said, her voice weak. "My people. We draw energy from the cosmic currents, from the song of living worlds, or from our ships, which are attuned to us. This moon is barren, and the drifter is silent." Preston felt a surge of protectiveness. He helped her to her couch, his initial wariness replaced by a growing concern. "What can I do?" Aurelia looked at him, her eyes clouded with pain. "There is an old ritual, a sharing of resonance. But it is intimate. It requires trust." Preston didn't hesitate. "Tell me what to do." Under her weak guidance, he sat facing her, their knees almost touching. She instructed him to clear his mind, to focus on his own internal energy, the spark of life within him. Then, she reached out, her slender fingers taking his. Pip, with a final effort, crawled from her shoulder onto their joined hands, its light pulsing weakly. As Aurelia began to hum a soft, low chant, Preston felt a strange warmth spread from their hands, up his arms into his core. It wasn't just physical warmth, it was a sense of connection. He felt a faint echo of her wariness, her pain, but also her immense inner strength, the deep well of her spirit. Pip's light began to stabilize, to glow a little brighter, drawing, it seemed, on both of them. The experience was profound, unsettling, yet deeply comforting. He saw fleeting images in his mind, swirling nebulae, ancient symbols, a sense of immense, interconnected life. When it ended, Aurelia's breathing was easier, a touch of color returning to her cheeks. Pip pulsed with a soft, steady light. "You shared your song with me, Preston Gauge," she whispered, her eyes full of a new emotion. "You have given a great gift. The karmic debt deepens." Preston just looked at her, the remnants of that shared resonance still thrumming within him. The barriers between them were crumbling, replaced by something fragile yet powerful. Trust was blooming in the desolate dust of XM734, and with it, the first stirrings of an emotion neither of them had expected to find in the wreckage of their lives. The silence of the moon was no longer empty. It was filled with the unspoken language of their growing connection. Days turned into a tense routine of repairs, resource gathering, and anxious sky watching. The harvesters hadn't made a direct move into the valley, but Preston knew they were out there, patient, waiting. He managed to get the Wanderlust short-range sensors partially operational, enough to confirm the harvester ship was maintaining a patrol pattern just beyond the valley's mouth. They were trapped. During one of their quiet evenings, huddled in the dim light of the Wanderlust's bridge, Aurelia spoke of Xylos again. This time, she didn't just describe it, she tried to show him. She sat in a meditative posture, Pip resting in her lap, glowing with a soft internal luminescence. "Focus on Pip's light, Preston," she instructed. "Let your mind quiet. Listen for the echo of the star song." Hesitantly, Preston did as she asked. As he stared into the creature's gentle glow, the dim confines of the bridge seemed to recede. Faint, ethereal music, like distant wind chimes and whispered starlight, filled his senses. Images flickered at the edge of his perception, a world of crystalline trees under a sapphire sky, oceans that shimmered with liquid light, and graceful, bioluminescent beings moving in harmony. It was a place of breathtaking beauty and profound peace. "This is the sanctuary." Aurelia's voice seemed to echo in his mind, though her lips hadn't moved. "This is what the harvesters want to unmake." The vision faded, leaving Preston breathless. "It's real?" he said, awestruck. "More real than anything I've ever charted." Aurelia opened her eyes, a sad smile on her lips. "It is, and it holds more than just beauty, Preston. The star song of Xylos also speaks of a safeguard, an ancient device from a time before the harvesters grew so bold. They call it the null field generator." Preston leaned forward, his curiosity now ignited with a new urgency. "A null field generator. What does it do?" "It creates a zone where most forms of directed energy weaponry cease to function," Aurelia explained. "Imagine their particle beams, their plasma cannons, rendered inert. It would level the field, give those who fight for harmony a chance against their overwhelming firepower." Suddenly, their predicament, Aurelia's quest, took on a new dimension. It wasn't just about finding a lost homeworld. It was about finding a weapon that could change the course of a silent, creeping war Preston hadn't even known existed. The harvesters. Preston realized aloud. They're not just hunting you because of the star song. They're hunting you because you can lead them, or others, to this generator. Aurelia nodded, her expression grim. They know its legend. They believe that if Xylos is found, the generator will be activated. It is why they are so thorough, so relentless in their pursuit of Datascryers who carry the Xylos lineage. The weight of this revelation settled upon them. Their escape from XM734 was no longer just about personal survival. It was about getting Aurelia, and the knowledge she carried, to Xylos. Preston looked at his damaged ship, at the hostile moon around them, at the patient harvester ship patrolling outside. The odds were astronomical. But for the first time in a long time, Preston felt a sense of purpose that transcended mere survival or the abstract beauty of his star charts. He looked at Aurelia, at her luminous eyes filled with a blend of ancient sorrow and fierce determination, at Pip, her tiny, steadfast companion. A deep, protective instinct welled within him, intertwined with a growing admiration and a warmth that was undeniably romantic. "We have to get to Xylos," he said, his voice firm. "Not just for you, Aurelia. For everyone they threaten." Aurelia's eyes widened slightly, searching his. She saw no calculation, no self-interest, only a raw sincerity that mirrored the resonance she had felt when they'd shared their energy. "Preston Gauge," she said softly, "your song, it grows stronger." Their planning became more focused, more desperate. They needed to repair the Wanderlust's engines enough for a short, powerful burst, enough to clear the valley, and make a jump before the harvesters could react. It was a monumental task with their limited resources. During one particularly grueling repair session, working side by side in the cramped engine compartment, their hands brushed. A spark not of static electricity, but of something else passed between them. They both froze, looking at each other in the dim, greasy light. The air crackled with unspoken emotions. Preston found himself captivated by the flecks of starlight in her eyes, the gentle curve of her lips. Aurelia saw in his gaze not just a pilot or a salvager, but a man of quiet strength and unexpected depth, a man who had risked everything for her, a stranger. "Preston," she began, her voice barely a whisper. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the side of her face, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "Aurelia," he murmured, his own voice husky. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. Their kiss was tentative at first, then deepened, a desperate, hungry affirmation of life and connection, amidst the ever-present threat of death. It was a kiss that tasted of engine oil, recycled air, and the faint, ethereal scent of starlight that always clung to her. Pip, who had been observing them from a nearby conduit, let out a soft, contented trill and glowed with a warm, golden light, as if approving of this new harmony. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the universe outside seemed to fade. There was only the two of them, their hearts pounding in unison. "The karmic balance," Aurelia whispered, her forehead resting against his, "shifts. It sings a new refrain for us." Preston held her close, feeling a sense of rightness, of belonging, that he hadn't known he was missing. Love, unexpected and profound, had taken root in the most desolate of places. Their newfound connection fueled their efforts. They worked with a renewed synergy, Preston's practical skills and Aurelia's intuitive understanding of technology complementing each other perfectly. Slowly, painstakingly, they brought the Wanderlust main engines back to a semblance of functionality. It was a patchwork job, held together with ingenuity and hope, but it might just be enough. Their escape plan was audacious. They would use the wreckage of the Stardust Drifter as a decoy, rigging it with a small thruster to send it moving erratically out of one end of the valley, hopefully drawing the harvester ship's attention. While the harvesters investigated, Preston would attempt to blast the Wanderlust out of the other end and make an immediate, pre-calculated jump to the coordinates Aurelia provided from her star song The Path to Xylos. The night before their planned escape, they stood outside the Wanderlust, looking up at the alien sky, and the twin suns had set, and the stars of this unfamiliar system blazed with fierce intensity. "Are you afraid?" Preston asked quietly, taking her hand. Aurelia squeezed his fingers. "There is always fear when facing the unknown or the known enemy. But with you, Preston, the fear is less. There is also hope." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Pip nestled between them, pulsed gently. "I never thought," Preston began, then paused, searching for the words. "I never thought I'd find anything but empty space out here. Or more debts." Aurelia smiled softly. "The universe offers many paths, many exchanges. Some are of sorrow, some of obligation, and some are of the heart." He turned her to face him, cupping her face in his hands. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Aurelia Vesta, know this: finding you was the greatest discovery of my life." Her eyes shimmered in the starlight. "And you, Preston Gauge, are the unexpected star that illuminated my darkest voyage." Their kiss this time was not of desperation, but of deep, abating affection, a promise whispered to the silent, watching stars. The harvester probe, a small, insectoid drone, slipped into the valley just as they were finalizing their preparations. Its sudden appearance sent a jolt of adrenaline through them. "They're getting impatient," Preston gritted, watching its erratic flight path on his restored sensor screen. "It's now or never." They rushed through the final steps. Aurelia, with a sorrowful look at the inert Stardust Drifter, activated the small thruster they'd rigged. The crippled alien ship lurched, then began to slide slowly towards the northern end of the valley. "May its remaining echoes find peace," she whispered. Preston was already at the Wanderlust's helm, his hands flying over the controls, coaxing life into the protesting engines. Engines spooling. Barely. "Aurelia, are those coordinates locked in?" "Locked and verified by the star song," she confirmed from the co-pilot seat, her own face a mask of concentration, Pip on her shoulder glowing with focused intensity. The harvester probe, detecting the movement of the Stardust Drifter, zipped off to investigate. Moments later, the larger harvester ship itself altered course, heading towards the decoy. "That's our cue!" Preston slammed the throttle forward. The Wanderlust shuddered violently, then, with a deafening roar from its patched-up engines, clawed its way into the sky, heading for the southern exit of the valley. The G-forces were immense, pressing them into their seats. Alarms blared as systems strained under the sudden demand. "Come on, baby, hold together," Preston muttered through clenched teeth. They cleared the valley ridge just as the harvester ship, realizing the deception, began to turn its sleek black form menacing against the horizon. "They see us," Aurelia cried. "Calculating jump solution now," Preston yelled, his fingers dancing over the navigation console, the one Aurelia had so miraculously revived. The jump drive whined, protesting the abuse, building up the necessary charge. Energy bolts from the pursuing harvester ship seared the space behind them. One struck their aft shields, making the whole ship ring like a struck gong. "Shields failing?" Aurelia reported, her voice tight. Almost there," Preston chanted, his eyes glued to the charging indicator. Now, with a gut-wrenching lurch and a flash of distorted light, the Wanderlust tore a hole in space-time and plunged into the swirling chaos of hyperspace, leaving XM7 and 34 and the furious harvesters behind. For now, the journey to Xylos was unlike any Preston had ever undertaken. Aurelia's star song was not a set of coordinates to be plugged into a navicomputer, but a flowing, intuitive path through the interstellar medium, sometimes requiring them to skim close to nebulae that pulsed with strange energies, or navigate asteroid fields so dense they defied conventional charting. Preston's skills as a cartographer were pushed to their limits, translating Aurelia's psionic guidance and Pip's subtle light cues into actual helm movements and micro-jump calculations. He found that his own intuition, awakened on XM734, was growing sharper, more attuned to the subtle currents of space-time she seemed to perceive so effortlessly. They worked in tandem, a seamless blend of human technical skill and alien empathic navigation. During the long stretches between course corrections, they talked, sharing stories of their pasts, their dreams, their fears. The confines of the Wanderlust became their universe, a small bubble of warmth and growing intimacy against the vast, cold expanse. Preston learned about the intricate social structures of the Datascryers, their deep reverence for the interconnectedness of all things, their concept of karmic balance influencing every interaction. Aurelia, in turn, listened with fascination as Preston described bustling human cities he'd only read about, the diverse cultures of the known galaxy, the relentless human drive for exploration and understanding. She saw the burden of responsibility he carried not as a flaw, but as a mark of his compassionate nature. She also saw the loneliness he'd endured, and her heart ached to fill that void, just as he was filling hers. Before leaving XM734, Preston, using a heavily encrypted channel he'd rarely employed, had managed to send out a condensed data packet. It contained a warning about the harvesters, their methods, and a veiled reference to a potential countermeasure being sought. He'd addressed it to a few semi-reputable contacts in independent systems, hoping to plant a seed of awareness, perhaps even a future alliance if they succeeded. It was a long shot, but it was something. As they drew closer to the Xylos system, according to Aurelia's increasingly urgent song, the sense of foreboding grew. The star song, while still clear, now carried an undertone of sorrow, of ancient conflict. "The approach will be perilous," Aurelia warned, her brow furrowed in concentration. Pip pulsing a troubled violet. "The harvesters, I feel their shadow here. They may not know the exact location of Xylos, but they know this region is significant." Her fears were confirmed when they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Xylos system. A fleet of harvester ships, larger and more formidable than the scout they'd encountered before, patrolled the system's perimeter like obsidian sharks. More chillingly, Preston's long-range scans picked up disturbing energy signatures emanating from one of the outer planets that tell tale signs of planetary-scale biological terraforming. The harvesters were already here, already beginning their work of consumption and remaking. "They've established a blockade," Preston said grimly, his hands tightening on the controls. "And they're already active." Aurelia's face was pale, her eyes burning with a mixture of grief and fury. "They defile this sacred space?" Slipping past the harvester fleet would require all their skill and a healthy dose of luck. Aurelia's star song guided them towards a treacherous asteroid belt, a graveyard of shattered planetoids from some ancient cataclysm. "The song weaves through the shadows here," she murmured, her eyes closed, her connection to Pip absolute. "There are gaps in their patrols, hidden currents. For hours, Preston piloted the Wanderlust through the dense, tumbling debris, relying on Aurelia's almost precognitive warnings of shifting asteroids and harvester patrol routes. It was a nerve-wracking ballad of stealth and precision. Several times, harvester ships passed dangerously close, their sensor sweeps washing over the Wanderlust, but somehow they remained undetected, shielded by the dense rock and Aurelia's uncanny ability to find the quietest paths. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they broke through the asteroid belt. Before them, glowing with a soft, internal luminescence that even the harvester presence couldn't entirely dim, was Xylos. It was a world of breathtaking, if scarred, beauty. Vast continents of crystalline forests shimmered under the light of its twin suns, interspersed with oceans that seemed to hold galaxies within their depths. But even from orbit, Preston could see the wound's colossal impact craters, vast swaths of land that were unnaturally barren, and the skeletal remains of what must have once been towering cities. This was not just a sanctuary, it was, as the stories hinted, a planet-wide battlefield. We're here. Preston breathed, a sense of awe mixing with trepidation. Aurelia gazed at her ancestral home, tears welling in her eyes. It is wounded, but its song still resonates with power. Her attention sharpened. The Nullfield generator. The star song leads me to the northern continent, to a range of mountains that hold the oldest ruins. They descended through Xylos' atmosphere, the Wanderlust buffeted by strange energy currents. The planet felt ancient, alive with forgotten energies and the ghosts of past conflicts. They landed in a hidden valley, surrounded by colossal, petrified trees that seemed to scrape the sky. The air hummed with a palpable energy, and the ground beneath their feet vibrated faintly. The harvesters have ground patrols. Preston noted, his sensors picking up distant movement. We'll have to proceed on foot from here. The generator is likely deep within those ruins, heavily defended if they know of its existence. Aurelia nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of a slender energy blade Preston hadn't seen her use before. It seemed to be made of the same crystalline material as Pip. The song is a beacon now, she said, her voice filled with resolve. It will guide us through the scars of the old war, to the heart of Xylos' hope. They equipped themselves with what little gear they had. Preston his trusty blaster pistol, though. He wondered how effective it would be, and Aurelia her strange, glowing blade. Pip perched on her shoulder, its light a focused, intense beam, cutting through the gloom of the ancient forest. The final stage of their journey had begun. A path leading them into the heart of a forgotten war, towards a device that could change everything. With the relentless harvesters closing in, the ruins of Xylos were a haunting testament to a conflict of unimaginable scale. Colossal structures, part organic, part machine, lay shattered across the landscape, their once gleaming surfaces now scarred and overgrown with alien flora. Strange automated defense systems, remnants of that ancient war, still sporadically activated, either their targeting sensors decayed but occasionally lethal. Preston and Aurelia moved cautiously, the silence of the dead world, broken only by the rustle of wind through the crystalline trees and the distant, unsettling chittering of harvester patrols. Aurelia's star song was their compass, leading them through labyrinthine corridors of fallen citadels and across plazas littered with the debris of forgotten war machines. Pip, on her shoulder, would occasionally emit a sharp pulse of light, warning them of a hidden trap or a nearby harvester scout. Preston, his senses on high alert, covered their advance, his blaster held ready, though he knew against the harvesters' numbers and technology, it was a meager defense. His cartographer's mind, however, was invaluable, quickly mapping their route, identifying potential ambush points and escape routes within the complex ruins. The generator is close, Aurelia whispered, as they emerged into a vast, subterranean chamber. The air here thrummed with a powerful, resonant energy. It is within the central spire. The central spire was a colossal, obsidian tower that pierced the roof of the cavern, its peak lost in darkness. Strange glyphs, glowing faintly, adorned its surface. And guarding its entrance were harvesters, not just the biological constructs they'd glimpsed before, but also heavily armored. Bipedal warriors wielding energy scythes, their forms a chilling fusion of chitinous carapace and gleaming metal. There must be at least a dozen of them, Preston muttered, peering from behind a fallen pillar. And that's just what we can see. Aurelia's eyes were fixed on the spire. The Nullfield generator is within. I can feel its dormant power calling to the star song. We need a diversion, Preston said, his mind racing. Something to draw at least some of them away from that entrance. His gaze fell upon a series of unstable-looking support structures on the far side of the chamber. If I can cause a collapse over there, it is too risky, Aurelia protested. You could be caught. It's riskier to try a frontal assault, Preston countered. Trust me, you need to be ready. Once that entrance is clear, or even partially clear, you go. Get to the generator, I'll cover you. Their eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of the danger, and the trust between them. Be careful, Preston Gauge, she said softly, her hand briefly touching his. Your song must not be silenced. He gave her a grim smile. Wouldn't dream of it. With surprising agility for a man more used to plotting star courses, Preston began to move, a shadow amongst shadows, making his way towards the support structures. He planted the few explosive charges he had left from the Wanderlust's emergency kit, setting them on a timed delay. As he retreated, a harvester scout, a skittering, multi-limbed creature, detected his movement. It let out a high-pitched shriek, alerting the others. So much for stealth. Preston grunted, opening fire with his blaster. The energy bolt struck the scout, making it recoil. But the armored warriors were already turning, their weapons powering up. The charges detonated with a deafening roar, bringing down a section of the cavern roof in a cascade of rock and ancient debris. Far from the spire but close enough to cause chaos. Several harvesters were caught in the rockfall, and others turned to investigate the commotion. Now Aurelia, go? Preston yelled, laying down covering fire towards the confused harvesters. Aurelia didn't hesitate. With Pip glowing fiercely, she sprinted towards the spire entrance, her energy blade crackling to life, a ribbon of pure light in the gloom. She moved with blinding speed, a whirlwind of grace and deadly precision, deflecting energy blasts, her blade singing as it met harvester armor. Preston fought his own desperate battle, drawing the attention of the remaining harvesters. His blaster pistol felt pitifully inadequate against their advanced defenses, but his shots were accurate, aimed at joints and optical sensors, anything to slow them down. He used the crumbling ruins as cover, always moving, always firing. He took a searing hit to his shoulder, the pain making him cry out, but he grit his teeth and kept fighting. He saw Aurelia reach the spire entrance, Pip pulsing rapidly as she placed her hand on a glowing glyph. The massive stone door began to grind open. But more harvesters were converging on her position. Aurelia, hurry! Preston shouted, even as a hulking harvester warrior bore down on him, its scythe whistling through the air. Inside the spire, Aurelia found herself in a vast, cylindrical chamber. At its center, suspended in a web of shimmering energy conduits, was the null field generator. It was an awe-inspiring sight, a sphere of intricate, interlocking crystalline components, pulsing with a deep, resonant hum that matched the star song in her soul. Glyphs similar to the ones on the door covered its surface. Pip flew from her shoulder, zipping towards the generator, its light merging with the device's own glow. This is it, Aurelia breathed, feeling the immense, dormant power within. But how to awaken it? The star song offered guidance, images of ancient Datascryers performing a complex ritual, channeling their own life energy, their own song into the device, amplified by their symbiotes. It was a delicate, dangerous process. She could hear the sounds of battle outside, Preston's shouts, the roar of harvester weapons. There was no time. Placing her hands on the cool surface of the generator, she closed her eyes, reaching deep within herself, calling upon every fiber of her being, every note of her ancestral song. Pip became a conduit, a bridge between her and the ancient machine, its light flaring, pouring Aurelia's focused will into the generator's core. The glyphs on the generator began to glow brighter, the resonant hum building in intensity. The entire spire started to vibrate. Outside, Preston was overwhelmed. His blaster was empty. The harvester warrior stood over him, scythe raised for the final blow. He closed his eyes, bracing for the impact. Suddenly, a wave of pure, colorless energy washed outwards from the spire, expanding rapidly. It passed through Preston, through the harvester warrior, through the entire cavern. It felt like silence. A profound, all-encompassing quiet. The harvester warrior's scythe, which had been crackling with lethal energy, sputtered and died. Its optical sensors flickered and went dark. The creature looked down at its inert weapon in confusion, then at Preston. All around the cavern, harvester energy weapons were failing. Plasma rifles fizzled out. Energy shields collapsed. The chittering of their technology ceased. The null field was active. Preston, stunned but alive, seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, using the butt of his useless blaster to strike the Harvester warrior's unshielded head. The creature stumbled back, disoriented. He scrambled to his feet, pain lancing through his shoulder, but adrenaline surging through his veins. Aurelia emerged from the spire, her face pale but triumphant, Pip hovering beside her, glowing like a miniature sun. "It is done," she called out. "Their energy weapons are useless." The remaining harvesters, now stripped of their primary advantage, were thrown into disarray. Some tried to attack with physical force, but without their powered armor enhancements and energy weapons, they were far less formidable. Preston, his own weapon useless, grabbed a heavy metal shard from a fallen structure. He and Aurelia, back to back, faced the confused and enraged remnants of the Harvester force. Aurelia's energy blade, which seemed to be powered by a different, perhaps psionic or biological source, still blazed brightly. She was a dervish of light and motion, her blade deflecting clumsy physical attacks, finding chinks in their armor. Preston, fighting with a savage desperation, used his makeshift club to bash and parry. It was brutal, close-quarters combat. A particularly large harvester, a bioengineered horror with multiple limbs and razor-sharp claws, charged at them. Aurelia met its charge, her blade a blur while Preston hammered at its exposed flank. Together, they brought the beast down. The tide had turned. The remaining harvesters, realizing their technological superiority was gone within this field, began to fall back. Then to flee, their retreat disorganized and panicked. The great cavern, moments before a lethal battlefield, gradually fell silent, save for their ragged breathing and the steady, powerful hum of the null-field generator. They stood amidst the wreckage, battered, bleeding, but victorious. The null-field generator pulsed at the heart of the spire, a silent guardian. Preston leaned heavily against a pillar, his wounded shoulder throbbing. Aurelia rushed to his side, her eyes filled with concern. "Preston, you're hurt." "Just a scratch." He grunted, though the searing pain told a different story. He looked at her at the fading light of battle in her eyes, replaced now by a soft radiance. "You did it, Aurelia. You actually did it." She smiled, a genuine, luminous smile that made his heart ache. "We did it, Preston Gauge." Pip, seemingly exhausted but content, nuzzled against her cheek, then floated over to Preston, gently touching its light to his injured shoulder. A soothing warmth spread through the wound, dulling the worst of the pain. "Your little friend is full of surprises," Preston said, managing a weak grin. Aurelia cradled his face in her hands, her touch gentle. "You fought like a Zealand warrior of old," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved me. You saved this place." He covered her hands with his own. "And you saved me, right back. Seems we make a habit of it." In the quiet aftermath of the battle, surrounded by the ancient stones of Xylos and the thrumming power of the null field, their bond, forged in crisis and deepened by love, felt unbreakable. He drew her close and their lips met, a kiss of relief, of shared triumph, of a love that had stared death in the face and emerged stronger. The silence of the null field was not empty. It was filled with the promise of a new beginning. The immediate aftermath of the battle was a blur of tending to wounds and taking stock. Preston's shoulder injury was nasty, an energy burn that would scar. But Aurelia, using some of Pip's energy and her own innate healing abilities, managed to cleanse it and bind it with salvaged medical supplies. She herself was bruised and utterly exhausted, the effort of activating the null field having taken a tremendous toll. Pip, too, was drained, its usually vibrant light reduced to a faint, sleepy pulse. They rested within the relative safety of the spire, the generator's steady hum a comforting presence. The harvesters had completely withdrawn from the immediate vicinity of the null field's influence, their retreat confirmed by the Wanderlust sensors, which Preston had managed to remotely activate, using a command sequence Aurelia had helped him patch together. The null field itself seemed to cover a significant portion of the ruined city complex, a tangible zone of safety. "What now?" Preston asked, his voice hoarse. They were safe for the moment, but they were still on a war-torn planet, deep in harvester-controlled territory. Aurelia looked towards the entrance of the spire, towards the silent, wounded world outside. "Now," she said, a new strength in her voice. The song changes. "Xylos is no longer just a memory or a sanctuary. It is a beacon." As if on cue, a faint signal registered on the Wanderlust's comm system. It was heavily encrypted, using protocols Preston recognized from his desperate message sent before they jumped to Xylos. One of his contacts, a cautious but influential leader of an independent traders coalition, was responding. The message was brief. Harvester activity reported escalating across multiple sectors. Your warning timely. Null field data intriguing. Require verification. Coordinates. Preston showed the message to Aurelia. A slow smile spread across her face. It seems your seeds of warning have found fertile ground. Preston Gauge. The existence of the null field, a tangible weapon against the Harvester's technological dominance, was a game-changer. The very thing the Harvesters had sought to prevent the unification of disparate factions against them was now a distinct possibility. Their personal struggle had ignited a spark that could spread across the galaxy. In the quiet hours that followed, as they recovered their strength, the unique connection between them seemed to deepen, to evolve further. With Pip acting as a willing, almost eager bridge, they found they could sometimes share thoughts, fleeting images, and emotions with a clarity that transcended words. It wasn't telepathy in the conventional sense, more like a profound empathic resonance, a shared consciousness that flickered in and out of focus. When Aurelia touched Preston's injured shoulder, he not only felt the physical sensation, but also a faint echo of her concern, her desire to heal. When he worried about their next move, she sensed his anxiety and could offer reassurance not just with words, but with a wave of calming emotional energy. It was as if their souls, already intertwined by love and shared experience, were learning to speak a new, silent language. Pip, nestled between them, would glow with a soft, intricate pattern of light whenever this connection solidified, as if it were the weaver of this extraordinary tapestry. This new shared insight, this psionic harmony, would be another weapon in their arsenal, another facet of their unexpected union. Their fight was far from over, but standing together in the heart of Xylos, they were no longer just two survivors, they were partners, their destinies irrevocably linked, ready to face whatever the stars threw their way. Weeks later, the Wanderlust, now bearing the subtle enhancements of Aurelian technology integrated by her intuitive touch, orbited Xylos. The planet below was no longer silent. Small ships, bearing the insignia of various independent factions and guilds, drawn by Preston's initial warning and the incredible news of the null field, had begun to arrive. Xylos was becoming a rallying point, a symbol of defiance. Engineers and scientists, human and alien alike, worked cautiously with Aurelia and a handful of other emerging Datascryers she had begun to sense across the void, studying the null field generator, trying to understand its ancient mechanisms and perhaps, one day, replicate its effects. Preston stood on the bridge, no longer a solitary cartographer but a vital liaison, his knowledge of galactic politics and his calm demeanor proving invaluable in managing the fragile new alliance. He was still burdened by responsibility, but it was a shared burden now, lightened by purpose and the constant, reassuring presence of Aurelia at his side. She had blossomed. The hunted refugee was gone, replaced by a confident, compassionate leader, her voice carrying the wisdom of the star songs and the strength of her convictions. She moved between the factions, her very presence a calming influence, Pip a constant, radiant companion on her shoulder, sometimes offering its own silent insights. Her people's concept of karmic balance was slowly being understood, if not fully embraced, by those who came to Xylos seeking aid. Favors were exchanged, obligations undertaken, creating a web of interdependence that transcended mere treaties. One evening, they stood together at the Wanderlust's main viewport, watching the scarred but resilient face of Xylos turn below them. The twin suns cast long shadows across the crystalline forests and shimmering oceans, painting the ancient battleground in hues of gold and amethyst. Aurelia leaned her head against Preston's shoulder, her hand finding his. The star song of Xylos is no longer a lament, she said softly. It sings of hope, of renewal. Preston squeezed her hand, and we, my love, are part of its chorus. He smiled. The lines of worry that had once seemed permanently etched on his face softened by a deep contentment. I used to chart empty quadrants and forgotten stars. Now we're charting a new future, together. Aurelia turned to him, her eyes, those beautiful nebulae of light, filled with an emotion so profound it stole his breath. Our karmic balance is strong, Preston Gauge. She whispered, her lips brushing his. It is a constellation that will light our way, across all the stars, through whatever storms may come. Pip, nestled securely on her shoulder, pulsed with a warm, steady glow, a tiny beacon of their shared love, and the new life they were building, a testament to an unexpected union. that had not only saved them, but had offered a flicker of hope to a galaxy teetering on the brink. The fight for love and new life had truly begun, and its melody was just starting to resonate across the stars.